The Astros cap off the month of June on a high note as they take 2 out of 3 games from the New York Mets in Queens this weekend. It was a pretty fun series, some positives, some negatives. We've got a lot to talk about, and it's all coming up next. Stay tuned. Unfortunately, the Astros were not able to get a sweep this weekend. Very well could have, but it just didn't work out. Well, let's cap off the series nonetheless. But before we do that, let's dive into a couple of injury updates because we've got a lot to share today. Starting with Jake Bloss, he threw a bullpen session today in New York City, and he stated that he felt great. He even walked away with a smile on his face, according to Joe Espada, which is really, really good to see. He is eligible to come off the injured list on the 7th of July, which would be the final game of the Astros 10-game road trip that they're currently on right now. So we'll see if he comes off the injured list at that point. Would certainly like him to, because the series finale of this series. So today, as when you guys are hopefully seeing this, was when the Astros had to go with the bullpen game today. So hopefully he can come off by then, but we'll see. Next up, Victor Caratini, who was on the IL with a hip flexor strain, resumed baseball drills today. He did start running and while rehabbing down here in Houston. And then Joe Espada does say that he will rejoin the team in Minneapolis next weekend to continue his rehab, which will hopefully include taking some BP. We'll see. And then last but certainly not least, Kyle Tucker. Obviously we haven't had much to say on him over the past couple of weeks, but he is continuing to make some relatively slow progress. Obviously, slow is better than none. He did take some swings this past weekend, albeit off of a batting tee, and he did run on the treadmill again, but obviously he hasn't done much baseball drills besides that, so hopefully he can come back soon. But again, it's taken a while. And meanwhile, as we look at the All-Star voting, Kyle Tucker is actually one of 3 Astros in that phase who have been advanced to the phase 2 of the All-Star voting. Altuve and Yordan were the other 2. And those 3 guys are all vying for All-Star spots for the All-Star game in Arlington later this summer. So hopefully Kyle Tucker can make it there. I am going to be a bit upset if he's not going to be healthy enough to play in that game. He does say that the leg does continue to feel better each day. Hopefully he can return sooner rather than later. We'll see. But diving into the series itself, game 1 of this series was a bit more dreadful. It was the one loss in this series as the Astros had snapped their season-high 6-game win streak. Altuve did homer on the first pitch of the game, but unfortunately, aside from getting an RBI, I think in the 3rd inning, if I'm not mistaken, that was as good as this game got for the Astros, as Ronel Blanco had a bit of a hiccup in this game. Even before Ronel Blanco had a meltdown, I think in the 6th inning or something like that. I didn't take a lot of notes on this game, I'm sorry. But before Ronel Blanco's meltdown, the Astros did have quite a bit of opportunities to score more runs. But, all in all, on the night, they went 2 for 14 with runners in scoring position, and they stranded 14 base runners. Even through the first 2 games of this series, for 18 innings, they had a base runner in all but 1 inning, and that was just the first inning of game 2. And again, I'm talking about just the first 2 games of this series and not the series finale. But for the first 2 games, the Astros had plenty of base runners. It was just in game 1 of this series, they weren't able to cash them in. Game 2 of this series, on the other hand, and we're going to jump to that, they were able to do exactly that, as Jake Myers got the scoring started with a home run after he had battled through 9 pitches prior to hitting that home run. But Framber Valdez had a bit of a meltdown start in this game, because after the Mets had tagged him for 6 runs and then they were leading 6-1 after 3, it seemed that a series loss was imminent. But obviously, 1 inning at a time, 1 batter at a time, the Astros crawled back from this deficit. Starting here in the top of the 4th, Jeremy Pena would end up hitting a 2-run double to make it 6-3 Mets. John Singleton got the Astros 1 run closer with an RBI single of his own to bring the Astros within 2. And that was what the score would be as we go to the 8th inning. But then the 8th inning was when disaster would strike, for the Mets that is. Jake Diekman, who was the Mets pitcher to start this inning, had allowed back-to-back walks. Mauricio Dubon then grounded out to advance both of those runners to 2nd and 3rd, albeit with 2 outs. And then at that point, the Mets manager then brought on a new pitcher to make a pitching change. But prior to that, Joe Espada was calling on Cooper Hummel to pinch hit for Cesar Salazar. So then after the Mets had made a pitching change, Joe Espada immediately called him back and instead called on Trey Cabbage to pinch hit in this game instead. He would end up then drawing a walk, but it was a bit more dramatic in the sense that after it was a 6-pitch AB, and as I throw the pitch on screen for you guys, you can clearly see it was a 6-pitch walk. But at the same time, the umpires were a bit confused in that the sixth pitch was ball 3, but they quickly converged together. And after a quick little review with New York, they had determined that that sixth pitch was in fact ball 4, and so then Trey Cabbage was then put on base to load the bases for Jose Altuve. And then during Altuve's at-bat, Reed Garrett, who was the new pitcher for the Mets in this game, had uncorked a wild pitch to the backstop that then allowed Jake Myers, who was on third base, to score to make it a one-run game. And then Jose Altuve would then draw a walk to reload the bases for Alex Bregman. With the Astros just down by 2, Alex Bregman came on and he had snapped, I think, and he had snapped a super long 0-4. I think it was like 0 for 14 or something like that. He had not gotten a hit over his past, I think, 3 games or so, but he had gotten probably the biggest hit for the Astros this entire series to this point. Certainly one of the biggest hits this season so far, as he had hit a 2-run, 2-out, 2-strike single. Yes, there was 2 outs and 2 strikes before he got this base hit, and the count was full, mind you. So one of the common tactics for baseball teams is that whenever the count is full and there are 2 outs, usually all of the runners on base, if there are any, will get a head start. And that's exactly what happened. All 3 Astros base runners got a head start prior to this pitch to Bregman, and then he ended up wasting that 2-out single to plate the tying and go-ahead runs on what was probably the most clutch base hit that I think I've seen Alex Bregman hit this season so far. So, and then the Astros would then add on to that lead with a 2-run double by Mauricio Dubon to make it 9-6 Astros, and that would be the final score in this game, as Josh Hader would seal the deal to get the Astros back to 500. So now going into Game 3, do you think the Astros would get to 500 at this point? Well, the fact that it was going to be a bullpen game today seemed like it was going to be quite the daunting task. But Sean Dubin was the opener in this game, and he went 3.1 innings total. And again, you would think that getting to 500 would be a hard task with just a bullpen today. But surprisingly, it actually went pretty great, as Sean Dubin and Brian King had held the Mets hitless through 5 innings, and the Astros scored 4 times over that span to go up 4-0 after 6 until Seth Martinez and Brian Abreu ended up blowing it to allow the Mets to tie the game going into Manfred innings. And then after Taylor Scott, who had pitched a scoreless 9th inning to send the game there to begin with, he had allowed the Mets to tie the game on the very first pitch of the bottom half of the 10th to plate their Manfred run, and the Astros had scored theirs in the top half of the 10th. And then in the 11th inning, the Astros would then tee off on the Mets' last reliever of this game, scoring 5 times in the 11th inning to win this game by the final score of 10-5, taking the series 2 out of 3 and also getting MLB's best record this month. They are above 500 for the first time all season. And then meanwhile, the Mariners also had lost 2 out of 3 games to the Minnesota Twins. They've actually lost 7 of their last, I believe they have lost 8 of their last 11. The Texas Rangers, of course, have also been struggling, so they are also falling further behind the Astros in the standings. The Astros are just 2 games back in the loss column, and they're 3.5 games out overall to the Seattle Mariners as we enter play on Monday. So, obviously, continuing to take baby steps, the Astros have a very good chance to be in first place this week. Obviously, it's going to depend on what's going to happen for the Seattle Mariners and also what happens with us, of course. But there is a very, very high possibility, barring any disasters, I guess, that the Astros could see themselves in first place this month, which would be a shocker because they were 10 games out roughly about 2 weeks ago or so, and yet now they're just 3.5 games back with a very realistic chance that they could see themselves in first place by the end of this month. I mean, best case scenario that ends up being the case by then. Very, very stellar month of June for the Astros, as they've currently gone, 37-22, since starting 7-19. Absolutely crazy. This team has been absolutely killing it this month as they're continuing their relentless pursuit for baseball's biggest prize. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Leave your thoughts down below on how good this series was. I think this was a pretty good series. After they lost game 1, they ended up rallying to win the next 2. So, good series. Next up for the Astros, they will be headed to Toronto for 4 games to continue this 10-game 3-city road trip. So far, I think it's going pretty good. I think they just got to keep it up. If they just continue to keep this up, then they could see themselves in first place by the end of this month, like I said earlier. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it. Leave a like if you guys enjoyed. If you want to watch some of my other stuff, then click these videos that are above my shoulders. Leave a like if you guys enjoyed, like I said, and I'll see you guys in the next one.